Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at the Great Maester Conspiracy. Is there even a conspiracy? That's one of the questions we're going to be looking at today. If you're watching live, hi, great to see you. I said last week this was going to be a pre-record. It's not. I am live here today. I just got my dates wrong. So next week's going to be the pre-record. That one I think we'll probably do a Lord of the Rings stream before. But today we are looking at I've called it the Great Maester Conspiracy. There is no specific name for this. It's just a general feeling that the Maesters have got an agenda, and they are trying to push this agenda through their long existence. And every now and then, it looks like we can just sort of peek behind the curtains and we can just get a little glimpse about maybe what it is that they're doing. But I'll give a little bit of an overview to start with, answer questions from my patrons and from the chat as we go. And let's start off with some background. Where do the Maesters come from? I've got the quote from The World of Ice and Fire about the origins of the Citadel, and even there it's said we're not 100% sure. However, we're told most credit its founding to the second son of Uthor of the High Tower, Prince Peramore the Twisted, a sickly boy born with a withered arm and a twisted back. Peramore was bedridden for much of his short life, but had an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond his window. So he turned to wise men, teachers, priests, healers, and singers, along with a certain number of wizards, alchemists, and sorcerers. It is said the prince had no greater pleasure in life than listening to these scholars argue with one another. When Peramore died, his brother, King Oregon, bequeathed a large tract of land beside the Honeywine to Peramore's pets, that they might establish themselves and continue teaching, learning, and questing after truth. And so they did. So that's the sort of background and history that we have to why they're there in the first place. And if you're wondering how far back in time this is, it's a very long way back in time. We don't have an exact date, but the Uthor of the High Tower, who was Prince Peramore's father, he also appears in reference to legends about the High Tower. And the High Tower, you may well remember, House Hightower, George R. R. Martin has confirmed, are the oldest house in all of Westeros. And the High Tower, after which they are named, started out as just this ancient base unit with fused black stone. We could go down that tangent if you want to, but for these purposes, let's just say that is there and it is ancient and nobody's 100% certain where that came from. And then on top of that, they built the High Tower, and they tried, I think it was 4 times, building a wooden structure. Uthor is the person who is credited with commissioning a stone structure, the High Tower that we know today. Now, this is all Age of Heroes legends, but we can sort of put the timing here relatively clearly with the fact that the person that he allegedly commissioned to build the High Tower was Bran the Builder, which puts this then, even if this is not exactly right, and George R. R. Martin always tells us that we should be very cautious with legends in his world, but this puts us roughly at the same sort of age as the building of the wall, the establishment of Winterfell, and House Stark, the building of Storm's End. Some of the oldest, most ancient buildings and groups that we have in the entirety of Westeros all happened at roughly the same time. They're linked by this character, Bran the Builder, which incidentally, and we've not got huge amounts of evidence here at all, but just incidentally does potentially link this with what happens after the first long night. Because if we're taking Bran the Builder as being the founding father of House Stark as being the person who's helping to build the wall, which is obviously the response after the others had been pushed back. If we're saying that was his role, then this is what is happening in the south of the continent in response to the end of the Long Night. And one of my favourite pet theories, it's not a theory, it's an observation, is that so many of the important things, or things that may well be important for the defeating of the others, are on islands. We have the Isle of Faces, which is the hub of the Weirwood network. We have Dragonstone, which is where we've got the Dragonglass Mine. We've got Starfall, which is where the Sword Dawn is. And here we've got Battle Isle. The High Tower is on an island. So, and the link is made. There's the legend that you can see the wall from the top of the High Tower. You almost certainly can't, but unless by magic. The link is made there. So, not much more is made of that. We can speculate away, but that's the kind of the timing that we've got. And from there, they established the Citadel. These kind of proto-maesters. They established the Citadel, a center of learning, and it developed through time to the point where they trained people up, became formalized, as these things do. They trained people up and sent them out to be the maesters that we know today, attached to the noble houses of the land. And the maesters, so they seem to have very broadly two big roles. One is the sending maesters out to be the teachers, the advisors, the communications experts for the lords of the land, and the other is learning in and of itself. Some of which meant that people were based in the Citadel, with the library, and teaching others, and some of which the maesters went out and about in the world and learned from what was going on. If you read your way through the world of Ice and Fire, you will find so many examples of we know about what happened in this part of the world because a maester went over there. We know about what happened over here because this maester wrote about it. The maesters went over to Old Valyria all the time and they were learning things. We get all of this information from the maesters. And so, although we don't know exactly when this happened, it seems to have been sort of over time, this morphed into the organization that we know. They weren't, however, always the preeminent equivalent organization in Westeros. The pyromancers, the alchemists, it would appear the ancient order of alchemists were, for a very long time, they were equally powerful, if not more so. It's only recently, with the magic leaking out of the world, that the alchemists, the pyromancers' power has waned, and with that, the power of the maesters has waxed, which perhaps, and we will come back to this point, perhaps gives a little bit of a hint to their agenda and why they might be wanting to be limiting magic. Because that is the crux of this idea about the Great Maester Conspiracy, that they are seeking to build a world of science and reason in which there is no place for magic. Now, there's a few points at which we say maybe they proactively went out and did a thing there. But first of all, we do have to acknowledge the main way that they seem to, if this is their main agenda, they seem to have kind of engendered this through the realm, is through very much a soft power mechanism. They make sure that if you're training to be a maester, the night before you become a maester, you have to spend a night in a dark room with some glass candles, trying to get these glass candles to work, to create light. And you can't. That's the whole point of it. to teach you that magic does not work, which means that in order for you to become a maester, you have to have been indoctrinated in some way to understand that magic does not exist, magic does not work. And that is what the maesters took out as a general attitude. A maester doesn't have to be signed up to any secret agenda here at all. They go out and teach and train the next generation of nobles in Westeros with themselves having that belief. A good example, and we'll come back to this a little bit later because I've got a couple of questions on him. A good example is Maester Luwin, who you see all the way, particularly through book one, when he's talking to Bran, and Bran's there excited about magic, and he's excited about stories from old Nan, and he's excited about his dreams. And Maester Luwin is always just trying to calm him down. Magic doesn't exist. Yes, you've had some dreams, but think about that came true. But think about all the dreams you had that didn't come true. And he is all the way through just trying to just calm down everyone. That magic is not real. And if you imagine that everywhere across the Seven Kingdoms for centuries, that I think is probably the biggest kind of soft power pursuit of this agenda, if there is an agenda, that you will find. However, I said there are a few points where we might be able to look at and say, is this them proactively going in to try and change the course of history? The first is the Doom of Valyria. Now, we talked about the Doom of Valyria a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to go through the entire theory, but it does seem pretty clear that one of the beneficiaries of the end of the Valyrian freehold was the Maesters. Suddenly, they became the hub of non-magical knowledge across basically the whole world. We have a Shy at the other end, which is very much a hub of magical knowledge, but the Citadel became the main hub of knowledge. And if they wished to get rid of dragons and magic, then that is the way to go. So I have theorized that they may well have been one of the driving forces behind the Doom of Valyria. Even if you don't believe that, you can then sort of fast forward in time all the way through to just after the Dance of the Dragons. And we have Westeros, who never really had dragons. Yes, millennia ago, dragons did fly around over Westeros, but for long periods of time, the dragons weren't over Westeros because the Valyrian freehold did not extend that far. And then with the Targaryen invasion, the dragons took over. And the number of dragons was expanding. There was 20 at the start of the Dance of the Dragons. Most of those died during the dance. And then you get this period of time after the dance when suddenly, with no clear explanation, nothing changing in terms of what was done, the dragon eggs stopped hatching good, healthy, live dragons. Most of them didn't hatch at all. The ones that did hatch, the dragons were deformed. Something changed there. Now, you could claim there weren't as many Targaryens around, but there were still some Targaryens around. They didn't really know what they were doing. They lost the knowledge of how to do it. Dragon eggs were hatching without them doing anything special before. This was just like a normal, there's a clutch of dragon eggs down there and dragonstone and another one's hatched. This happened without them doing anything. Something changed. Now, you have to ask who had the power to do that at that moment in time. And the simple fact is, and it's kind of glossed over in Fire and Blood, but when you look at it, you suddenly realize that there's a period of time, 6 months, maybe even longer, where Grand Maester Munken was the most powerful person in the entire Seven Kingdoms. In fact, one could argue the most powerful person in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. because the king was a child, which meant that, and this was Aegon III, which meant that he had no executive power. And in fact, he spent most of his time just staying up in his rooms. He didn't get engaged. He was understandably traumatized by what had happened in the dance. So there was no king ruling. So who would rule for the king? Well, you have regents. And they established 7 regents at the start of the regency. Within 2 years, 6 of them had either died or been forced out or quit. 3 more were appointed. They went as well, leaving just one regent, Muncan. But obviously it's not just the regent, there's also a hand of the king. Well, they went through 4 hands of the king until one person was appointed hand of the king, Muncan. Well, okay, the hand of the king also rules through the small council. What about them? Well, they all went as well. The only member left of the small council was Muncan. Added to all of that, there used to be a protector of the realm who was gone, and the main families, the lords paramount of the land, they were not paying attention to what was happening in King's Landing. They partly in the north, harsh winter. They weren't paying any attention. In the south, it was mostly children because the parents had been killed during the dance, which meant that what we're left with is Grand Maester Muncan, who is the regent and the hand of the king and the small council and the head of the communications network for the entire 7 kingdoms. If anyone had the power to do something, it was him. And during that time, Aegon III ordered that the dragon eggs be... He hated dragons for a period of time. Again, completely understandable. He was traumatized. He get them out of the Red Keep. So they weren't even under the sort of the roof of people who might sort of notice or care. Where did they go? Probably back to Dragonstone. Now, these dragon eggs, there was the opportunity there for them to therefore be poisoned. If anyone knew how to do that, it would have been the Maesters. There is a book, a legendary book, which apparently all copies have disappeared, but there might be one left somewhere down in the depths of the Citadel, The Death of Dragons. Is that what the Maesters did? Do we have a sort of a smoking gun? Is it clear it definitely was them? Well, no. But something happened, and that seems to be the most logical and likely explanation. When you then add in people like Marwyn the Mage, who later on say to Sam, who do you think killed the dragons the first time around? It's the Maesters. There are people who clearly think that that was the case. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about when we're saying the Great Maester Conspiracy. I think conspiracy is the wrong word. I think it's an agenda. And every now and then, they have to push it. Most of the time, though, it's just through soft power. So, the question, and we will come on to this a bit later, but I'll pose it here now. The question is, what does this mean for the story? Because what we've got is we've got this organization that really, really don't like magic, and they really, really don't like dragons. And for most of the past 150 years, they haven't had to worry about that. They've been doing okay. But then suddenly, over the space of a couple of years, everything is changing. Magic starts becoming hugely more powerful and prevalent. People are being brought back from the dead. The others are appearing beyond the wall. The children of the forest, they don't know this yet, but the children of the forest have been making a reappearance. Dragons are suddenly going to be appearing once more, coming from Essos. They will if they do have this agenda as strong as we think they do, they will react. And the question is, how? Okay, so that's by way of an introduction. Let's go to a few questions in the chat. Thomas, and I hope you'll forgive me for not trying to pronounce your surname. I would merely muddle it up quite badly. Saying off topic, but what is the point of Bloodraven's culling of the Targaryens? It seems important, but also George to have George having a pro-eugenics storyline? I mean, I don't know about pro-eugenics. The genetic inheritance is quite a strong theme within A Song of Ice and Fire. I think that much is pretty clear. Yes, we're slightly off topic, but very briefly, if Bloodraven was responsible, he was certainly responsible for killing quite a lot of the Blackfires, and on his watch, a surprisingly huge number of Targaryens did die in a surprising number of different strange ways. Why might he want that? Well, we have this prophecy about the prince that was promised coming from a very specific line. And if he wanted to make sure that that specific line was on the throne, then he had to get rid of a whole load of people who might potentially be in the way of that. So that's in order for that person to be the prince that was promised. So that's the sort of the high level thinking there. Michael Trainer saying, no question, but it's my daughter's name day and I'm feeling happy and generous. Thanks for the content, which is lulling her to sleep in the hospital. Happy birthday, Lily. Well, happy birthday, happy name day. I don't know, in the hospital, is this I don't know whether you're in hospital because this is her first name day of actual birthday, but I hope you're having a wonderful time. Which does remind me, in Deep Sleep, I mentioned this at the end of the last live stream I did. I don't know, I can't remember if I remember to put the link in. I'm sure someone, if you're watching this live, someone will put a link in the chat. The moderators will probably do that. I'm launching a new channel. I've not managed to put content on there yet, but I've set up the channel called In Deep Sleep because people tell me they use these videos to go to sleep. So I thought what I would do is I would just try and create a even more sleepy videos, if that makes sense. It's these live streams, this is where we're starting, but I would love your comments. Put the comments down under this video if you want. I'll ask my patrons for their thoughts of what kind of works. The first video I'm going to do is last week's live stream, just with like a fireside, some nice crackling fire sounds in the background. After the live stream finishes, then the video carries on with the sort of the white noise of the fire just there, a full 8 hours. So if that's what you want, then that's what I'm going to be producing over there. Let me know whether you think that works. Let me know whether another format might work even better. I'm sort of being led by people on this because people have told me that this is what they think would be good. So we'll see. But yes, do go and check out In Deep Sleep. If you want to do me a favor, if you can follow the link, I'll put the link after the stream down in the description. Then go over there and just subscribe. That would be really helpful for me. So when videos do come up, you'll get the notifications, and then you can let me know what you think about them. Okay, let's go to... there we go. Another question from Gilio saying, how is it the Citadel is the only bastion of liberal arts in all of Westeros? Is there any sociological reason they exist? Think Renaissance and the trend towards humanist philosophy in our world. Yeah, I mean, I think we're a little bit, if you try and map, obviously it's a very different history, but we're sort of a little bit before the Renaissance, if that makes sense. What we've got is still a very stratified culture. where you have the nobility, and then you have those who are the serfs, really, who are working for the nobility, and then you have the small folk. You have a very small kind of independent trader class, as far as we can tell. It is there, but in terms of sort of like a wider aristocracy in a city with the large number of rich people in that city, that hasn't really emerged yet. So, are there bastions of the liberal arts in other places in Westeros? Well, there certainly are. If you go over to Lannisport, there's a lot of people. There's gold, not just gold merchants, but also people crafting things from gold. So there's very much a sort of a crafting kind of sense over there. We don't have huge amounts about painting. It's random thought. Somebody noted this in a live stream here a while ago. There aren't many paintings mentioned in this. Tapestries, yes, definitely. And you could sort of say that is a sort of a liberal art kind of thing, often created by women, it would appear. But no, there's less of it. There's more when you go over to places like Bravos, and you see a lot more in terms of theatre culture and things along those lines. Why is it? It's because the system has become so entrenched that you haven't yet gained the expansion of an historians forgive me for sort of like glossing over all of these kinds of things, but you need a sort of an expansion of what I would call the middle classes to a degree, and it's spreading out of money from just the 1% to a little bit more, so that you can start having patrons of the arts, and that's when that goes. The Citadel, though, closely guard the knowledge, which means that a lot of these things, it's just the people who've been to the Citadel. Let's go to James Boras. Hi, Robert. Are you excited about United being in the Europa League final? Sorry, I haven't read that. I hope I haven't spoiled that for anyone. I know it's been a tough season, but at least you can get some joy from footy. Well, yes, I'm absolutely delighted. That was, I was just saying to a friend as I was watching that game, I think the first time for about half an hour, I was absolutely relaxed and enjoying watching Manchester United play football, which is a very rare feeling. We actually played well. I was very happy and I'm very excited. Right. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. Well, actually, quick flick through the chat. Agree Weirwood saying I've fallen asleep to some of the tales on the Well Told Tale. Yeah, that's another thing I might do, is put some of the tales from the Well Told Tale over there on In Deep Sleep. So what I will do is the idea is that over there I would create a long video so you can watch or listen to me, and then it sort of goes off into sort of relaxing sounds of some kind. No adverts in the middle of the video. I'll probably put some at the beginning and the end, just so the channel can pay for itself. But if you get to the end of an 8-hour video, then well done. But get a rude awakening from an advert. But that's the idea, is that it would be that solid long video that you can just press play, shut your eyes, and hopefully relax to. Simon Schaffner, is there any specific role the potential Valyrian steel ring reforging plays within the potential Grand Maester conspiracy? Or is it just an isolated incident of potential Maester sneakiness? Or is it a small part of the bigger picture? Right, so this is... and I've got a challenge to this coming up a bit later, which I'm quite looking forward to. But this is the fact that we have the Maesters. If you study the higher mysteries, which is basically magic, then you get in your Maester's chain, you get a Valyrian steel link. Now, I've said a number of times that this is really interesting because it means that there is a supply of Valyrian steel at the Citadel in some way. Because in order for you to be awarding your Valyrian steel link, which it may well be quite a small thing, but still Valyrian steel is hugely expensive, then you must be able to have enough to make a link in a chain. And it also seems to imply that the Maesters, they might not know how to make Valyrian steel, but they can at least reforge it in order to make it into a ring, in order to give it to somebody or attach it to somebody's Maester's chain. So, what does that mean? Is it just an incidental detail? Does it mean something for the bigger picture? I think the sort of the boring answer on the first bit is probably when George R. R. Martin wrote this first, he hadn't worked through all of the details about Valyrian steel. So this gets revealed. We get Maester Luwin gives a little speech. He's talking to Bran about halfway through book 1. He gives a little speech about the Valyrian steel link that he's got. So that's the probably slightly boring answer. But having expanded out this world and joined up all the different things, I think where we're at now is to say that I don't think this is a central part of the plot. However, it does open up a huge amount of possibilities. Because firstly, we know how important Valyrian steel is. It's one of the few things that we know of that might be able to kill the others. And Sam is very aware of that, and Sam is going down to Old Town. There's a lot of Valyrian steel there. If they know how to reforge the whatever amount of Valyrian steel they have into blades of some kind, that would be hugely powerful and hugely important. So it opens up that possibility. Would they be willing to do that? Well, if this helps them defeat the magical forces, it's entirely possible that they might do. It also, I think, adds to this potential, and this is part of the link in with the Doom of Valyria theory, which is where did the Lannisters get their Valyrian steel sword from? Because we're told the Valyrians refused to, because they had this prophecy about the Lannister gold causing doom, basically. So they refused to, and the Lannisters were desperate to do this. We know because Tywin Lannister was willing to spend huge amounts of money trying to get a replacement later on, and no one was willing to sell their Valyrian steel sword. So it seems unlikely that they managed to buy one that a family has already bought. So they must have commissioned somebody else who knows how to make Valyrian steel swords. Is it possible that the Maesters managed to amass enough Valyrian steel that they could forge it into a sword, bright raw, and sell that to the Lannisters? If so, they get a huge amount of Lannister gold, and that amount of Lannister gold could then be used fulfilling the prophecy about how this might bring the downfall of the Valyrians. So when you're saying, is it an isolated incident? Is it a small part of the bigger picture? I mean, I tend to think the way I see it is this opens up a huge amount of possibilities. We don't know yet, but the simple fact that there is some Valyrian steel down there at the very least, and probably they know how to reforge it, reshape it, adds in possibilities about where this may go. Right, let's go to question from Simon Schaffner. Another question from Simon, just saying, who are your top 3 maesters to get beers with? Which is a fun question in a group. And now, this is the kind of thing I would love to throw this out into the chat. Which maesters would you like to have a beer with? I suspect I've missed some pretty obvious ones. I think Marwyn looks like he would be a whole load of fun. He may not stay for the entire night. He may suddenly rush off somewhere else, but he looks like he would be a whole load of fun. Slightly cheating, but I think Alaras, Sorella, and all of that group, because we actually see them having fun down those who are in training to be a maester. We see them down the pub having a nice drink, and that seems, yes, there's a Tyrell there who seems not particularly pleasant, but other than that, it seems like quite a good gang. So I'd happily go with that. And then the other person, just because it would be quite amusing, was a guy called Reiben, who gets a mention in Fire and Blood and is described as being the Citadel's foremost expert on banned, forbidden, fraudulent, and obscene texts. And I think if you have anyone down the pub, an expert on those things, sounds like quite a fun person to talk to. Maybe he doesn't want to talk about them. Maybe he thinks they're all terrible, but you could learn a lot, I suspect. True Yellow Dart saying it's totally cheating, but I want to go to drinking with Septon Bath and Septon's Sefton. Yeah, there's a lot more Septons. When I was thinking about the Septons, I was thinking that there's a lot there. Imagine drinking with Septon Moon, for those who've read Fire and Blood. But Shelley J saying Marwyn Sam seems like a nice guy. I'm not quite sure whether he's like a go for a beers with kind of guy, but he seems like a nice guy. Maester Aemon. Oh, good call, Fletcher Reed. Yeah, he would be really interesting to go out and have a good long chat with. Okay, let's go to Sir Friend saying happy Thursday, Rob, and to you too. Building on from the theory I think you subscribe to, that the Maesters played a part in the dragons being wiped out, do you see something similar happening again with Dany's dragons? I think you've talked before about how narratively it could make sense for the 2 threats, others and dragons, to both be wiped out. It does make narrative sense. However, and don't hate me, fellow geeks, says Sir Friend, one of the few things I was on board with in the show's finale was Drogon surviving and presumably heading back to Valyria. Would love to hear your thoughts as well. Best wishes, warmest regards, and to you. Yes, I do subscribe to the theory that the Maesters did play a part in the dragon being wiped out. And you said I've talked before about how narratively it could make sense for the 2 threats to be wiped out. Yes, sort of. My view is, and how this was set out originally by George R. R. Martin as a trilogy, was you have 3 threats to the 7 kingdoms. You have the Civil War, you have the others, and you have the dragons. And they need to all be resolved. That all of those threats need to be resolved. And I think that's the word I would use rather than eliminated or destroyed or wiped out or anything along those lines. I think it's resolved is the word I'd use. Now, the story cannot end until the others pushing forward that threat has been dealt with. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a big battle and everybody's got their Valyrian steel swords and you kill every single one of them and that's over. Maybe that's how it's going to go, but that doesn't feel like that's the way that this story is heading. I'm still of the opinion that the most likely conclusion there is some kind of undoing of the magic that created the others or brought the others into play. So that would be resolved there. The dragons, how do you resolve the dragons being in Westeros? Well, I think you have to end up with the dragons not being in Westeros. That, I think, is the sort of the main point. Probably they die. But I'm with you in that if one dragon survives and flies off, we know not where, that would still provide, pardon me, a narrative end to that threat, because it is a threat. We often think of Dany as being, she's one of the good characters. We get behind her, and the dragons are on her side. But in terms of the meta story, dragons are incredibly dangerous, and they do kill a huge amount of people. And yes, the TV show just kind of fluffed the ending, but if all of the dragons are either dead or have left, that does provide a narrative conclusion there to that. And it does feel George R. Martin, if he's going for bittersweet, part of bittersweet might be this idea that, well, we have dealt with both of these threats, but it's possible maybe one day they'll come back. And that would still work for me. So might the Maesters play a part in that? I think because they've got the Valyrian steel link, the idea that they might play some role consciously or subconsciously in dealing with the others has to stay there. The fact that we have had seeded this idea of the Maesters having the knowledge of how to kill the dragons is also important. The death of dragons. The Faceless Men appear to be potentially looking for that book as well. So might they be involved? Yes, although as far as we can tell, the Maesters didn't kill huge flying dragons. They poisoned dragon eggs. So, I mean, might Drogon lay some dragon eggs and the Maesters say, don't worry, we'll deal with this? Perhaps. But yeah, they may have a role, but it's not going to be in shooting down dragons out of the sky. Martin S. saying, evening, Robert. I hope you are well. Ending my birthday with your live stream after some Bollinger Grande Année, James Bond beverage. Well, happy birthday to you. I hope you had a fantastic day, and yeah, you treat yourself. I hope you had a really good time, and great to see you here in the chat. Michelle Rimo saying, I don't want the dragons to die. I mean, if I had to guess, I think at least one of them will. Probably 2, possibly 3. Sorry. Andrew K saying, if dragons all die, we riot. Caius Ballerina saying, do Maesters take a vow? What is it? And is there a penalty for breaking it? Why is there no branch in King's Landing with the Grand Maester like the Faith have done? Okay, so yes, I mean there is a vow, but unlike with the Night's Watch, where we do actually see and hear the vow, we haven't actually been down there. Maybe Sam, when in the next book, maybe we will hear it through Sam. But they do give up all of their claims, their rights. They will not make. It's very similar to the Night's Watch and the Kingsguards. They will give up all claims to and titles and their surname. They are not going to marry or have children. They're going to be sort of devoted to the thing, to the mission of the Citadel, as it were. So yes, there is, but we don't have the exact text of it. In terms of why is there no branch in King's Landing with the Grand Maester like the Faith have done? I mean, it's an interesting question. So the Faith were basically invited in, build a massive sept here, and then because that was the center of political power, and they wanted to make sure they were in the center of political power, they they had the High Septon was then based there. The Maesters, obviously, they do send a Grand Maester. This is a new made-up post, incidentally. If you've not sort of picked up on this, the Grand Maester is not the head of the Citadel. It's a fancy title to make the king feel a bit better. But really, the governance of the Citadel and the Maesters carries on down in with the conclave down in the Citadel with the Archmaesters, and they appoint somebody each year to be actually doing the day-to-day running of things. But it's the Archmaesters who are in charge. They then send somebody up to King's Landing to be the Grand Maester, whose role it is basically to be the Maester to the king. So that's their role. And now, obviously, they're an experienced, learned, respected person, but they are not the head of the organization. So why? Why didn't they decide to set up a new mini citadel? I mean, I think probably because they did. They do think, for all of our talk about agendas and politics, I think most of the maesters, most of the time, do just think about learning and studying and teaching, and that's not a thing to do with politics. They can find out what's going on in King's Landing nice and easily. The Grand Maester writes back all the time, telling the Citadel what's going on, so they can influence events, but they don't need to have another little training college up there. Added to which, there is a huge political advantage. I should probably have thought through this even more, for the faith to have the Great Sept there, because suddenly the focus of all of the big state occasions, or most of the big state occasions, is the Great Sept. It's where we have weddings, it's where we have funerals, it's where lots of people gather together in one place. Outside of which we that's what they executed Ned Stark. This is the hub, which and makes people see that the faith is the center of everything, like that. So there's a huge advantage there for the faith to do that. The Maesters, they prefer actually operating in the shadows. They prefer having their influence to be very soft, quiet influence that people don't necessarily stop and think, wow, they're really powerful. So they didn't need that. That wouldn't be the political advantage for them. It would be for others. Desert Stormborn Charlie 11 saying, if they can reforge it, it's curious why Tywin doesn't ask them to reforge Ned's ice. Just an interesting side note, no real big deal. If you're wondering why, if the Citadel can reforge things, why would you get a blacksmith in King's Landing to reforge it? Well, pure practicality. It is in King's Landing. And added to which, if you have got, if there is, I don't know, if we're speculating that somewhere in the bowels of the Citadel there is a blacksmith, which does make sense, they would need metal things done. That is not a blacksmith who specializes in swords. That is a blacksmith who would specialize in links for Maester's chains, nails, horseshoes, the standard things. Tobbe Mott is an expert at making armor and swords. And so if he wants an excellent, high-quality sword, you go to the best person for it. I don't know whether that was the question we're asking, but or debating, but that's my take on what I think you were talking about. Okay, let's go to a question from Lady Pushkins saying, Maester Luwin is skeptical of magic, but has his Valyrian steel link, meaning he studied the higher mysteries. You would think these studies may have convinced him otherwise. Any thoughts? Yeah, well, I think what I'll start just by quoting, I kind of mentioned it a bit earlier. Luwin does give this little speech to Bran about, he finds the Valyrian steel link in his chain and he sort of holds it up. And he says, "This signifies that I have studied what the Citadel call the higher mysteries, magic, for want of a better word. A fascinating pursuit, but of small use, which is why so few maesters trouble themselves with it. All those who study the higher mysteries try their own hand at spells soon or late. I yielded to the temptation too, I must confess it. Well, I was a boy, and what boy does not secretly wish to find hidden powers in himself? I got no more for my efforts than 1,000 boys before me and 1,000 since. Sad to say, magic does not work." He goes on to talk about somebody he knew in the Citadel who would do little party tricks, making a rose appear behind somebody's ear and sort of say mostly of what we think about magic is just this. And then he says, well, okay, probably there was once magic. Probably the children of the forest did once exist. Dragons existed. There was magic, but no more. It's not there. So would Maester Aemon studying the higher mysteries, studying magic at the Citadel, not have shown him that magic is real? No, because he will have learned that magic used to be real, but it was bad. And if you've read through Fire and Blood, then you will know almost every time anything that appears to be kind of magical, particularly if there's like a woman who might seem to be magical in some way, they're always described in the worst possible sense. They always do horrific. They bathe in blood. They're necromantic. Whatever it is, there's something terrible about them. They're never just like a well-meaning person who had some magical abilities healed someone. That's never where this goes, and that is where the history books were. So he will have been reading all of these stuff saying magic is bad. Magic did used to exist, but everybody there, the wise, the learned, say magic is no longer around, and that is the message that is hammered home time and again in book one. We have the opening chapter, the prologue. We have magic. The end of the book, we have magic. We have one chapter in the middle with Bran. We have magic. Most of the time, the rest of it, all of the wise and clever people, Tyrion, Luwin, whoever, they're just laughing at the idea of magic. This is what the clever people think. Magic does not exist. Auntie Slayer has been a channel member for a month, and that has, I mean, you've got a sort of a free super chat or something along those lines. If you wish to support this channel, the best way to do that is via Patreon, link down in the usual place. And patrons, thank you. Chance to say thank you, patrons. Your support means huge amounts to me. I can't really put it into words, but thank you. If for whatever reason you do not wish to go to another site, go over to Patreon. Another way to support the channel, if you wish to do so, and thank you, by the way, if you do, is channel membership. There's a button somewhere on your screen that says channel membership, and one of the things you get there is you get your name highlighted in the chat, so I will spot it more. Anyway, Auntie Slayer, thank you very much. At its core, do you think the Maester's desire to rid the world of magic is rooted in good intentions, or is it purely a power play? It's an interesting question. I mean, I think maybe a bit of both. The desire to have and keep power, soft power. This is that they don't ever seem to go for like a real grab for power, being in charge of anywhere, but having the soft power, that is definitely there. But they can believe that the Maesters corporately have come to the conclusion that magic is bad for humanity. Now, I think there's a trying to work out whether there was a I've got another question that sort of links onto this, but I'll talk about this now. George R. R. Martin, when he's talking about magic in his world, it's quite interesting that he emphasizes when he's normally asked about hard magic systems versus soft magic systems. He's got a very soft magic system and doesn't like to explain exactly how magic works. The reasons that he gives are that he wants magic to be scary. He wants magic to be unpredictable. He wants it to be the kind of thing where, yeah, you might be able to summon a demon and it can grant you a wish, but what you wish for, it will manipulate and it'll all go wrong. And he wants that kind of feel that we have in the old kind of fairy tales, the folk tales from yesteryear and from you kind of see it in sort of hints and things in Shakespeare and things like that, and Dr. Faustus. This kind of idea that the magical, the spiritual, we can't truly understand it, we can't truly control it, and that if you take that as the starting point, then you have to say, okay, so the people who want that to just go away, you kind of understand it. It's probably too strong to call it a moral crusade, but them thinking no good comes from magic. You kind of understand, given the way that George R. Martin is writing it, that it's a position that you can get behind, you can understand, you can sympathize with. Gilio is saying, did the Targaryens provide copies of their dragon lore to the Citadel? And could this be have been used to slowly kill off dragons and still have them? Well, the short answer is we don't know, because we don't know what dragon lore the Targaryens had. Certainly, by the time we get to Aegon V, he's still searching for dragon lore knowledge in Asshai and places like that. When Dany thinks about these kind of things, then she's half remembering stuff. She's on the back of Drogon, flying off into the Dothraki Sea. She cannot control him, and she like half remembers. Oh, yeah, I'm sure that the Valyrians used to have dragon horns they could use to control their dragons, but she can't. She doesn't know. So undoubtedly they have lost a lot, but we do not know how much the Targaryens brought with them. Presumably, whatever books and knowledge and lore they had, but we're not told that they were the great scholars. That's not the thing that we're told. We're not told that they had a massive library or anything like that. We don't read about it. I have to admit, I was very struck for the set design for House of the Dragon, and I don't know where this has come from, but it has been clearly a conscious decision you remember they've got a couple of rooms where they've got like these sort of crisscross pattern all along the walls, and there are scrolls and there are books in there, and several times we see characters reading books. Rhaenyra's reading a book about Visenya or about the doom of Valyria. They have got a whole lot of knowledge, and you have to wonder what happened to that. Where did that go? Because it doesn't seem to still be there by the time we get to A Song of Ice and Fire. Would the Maesters have kept the knowledge? I think almost certainly Maesters in Dragonstone will have been sent there because they had some knowledge of curiosity about interest in dragons and Valyria and things like that. So the Maesters who were there during the time that the Targaryens were there, it would make sense if they certainly copied over a few things, memorized some stuff, wrote things down, maybe even stole the occasional thing here or there. That makes absolute sense to me, because that's what they were about. We know that the Maesters went over to Valyria to collect as much knowledge as they could. It would make sense that they go to, if they think there's knowledge in Dragonstone, Maesters would go to Dragonstone to try and collect that knowledge. So probably the Citadel has got a large amount of information about dragons, how they live, how they die, which could be used theoretically to kill off dragons. Yes. We just do not know. Quick flick through. I think you've got one. I think I've got another super chat here. Hugo Damask gifted 5 IDG live memberships. Yeah, thank you very much. You can do, if you've been a member for a while, you can gift memberships to other people. Please do that. As I say, it gets your name up there. I will see it more in the chat. So thank you very much for that. I hugely appreciate it. Right, question from Gina Z. Following up on the Luwin point, saying, "Happy Thursday, Robert, and to you. I'm curious about Maester Luwin. Did any of his actions hint that he was furthering a Maester agenda? And to what degree were his views on magic changed by seeing the Stark children with their direwolves?" Okay, so for most of the time, particularly in book 1, Maester Luwin is there actively acting against magic, or belief in magic is probably a better way of saying it. He's there plenty of times. He's coming up with sleeping. Bran says, "Oh yeah, I had some crazy dreams last night, all about a three-eyed raven and a weirwood tree." And Maester Luwin says, "Right, well, we'll mix up this sleeping draft for you. You really should be taking that." And then Bran says, "I had this dream about such and such." And then Maester Luwin says, "Oh, yeah, but think about the dreams that you've had that haven't come true." With the direwolves, he's one of the people who's most strongly in favor of them being chained up. In fact, complete aside here, but when we get this vision, Jojen has the vision of the winged direwolf held down by chains. We often interpret this rightly, I think, as this is Bran. He's the direwolf. The wings are there because, the flying metaphor for magic, and he's being held down in Winterfell. But the person in Winterfell most associated with chains is Maester Luwin. He's always tugging at the chain around his neck. That's brought to our attention 5-6 times in the text. He tugs at the chain. This is something that is really grating on him as much as anything else. He talks about the direwolves should be chained up. He is, much as we love Maester Luwin, and I think the actor Donald Sumpter, I think what his name was, did a fantastic job. But he is sort of thematically the chains that is holding Bran down. He's the person who is actively preventing Bran from engaging with this magical awakening that he's getting. Right. So anyway, so that's his role for most of this story. There's a chapter, the chapter when Bran gets this vision of his father down in the crypts. Is, if you read it, it is basically a whole chapter devoted to Bran saying, "I magically think this is going on," and Maester Luwin saying, "Yeah, but magic doesn't exist." "Okay, we'll indulge you. We'll go down there. Look, is your father here?" "No, he's not here." "Okay, let me tell you about you. You dream these things. Well, let me tell you about that. What about magic? Does magic exist? Well, let me tell you about what I've learned about magic." And all of this time is him just saying no. magic isn't real. And it ends with the Raven coming, alerting them to the fact that Ned is dead. So, which is this kind of like, oh, maybe Bran had a point. But we don't get to really see his reaction after that. But where does he go from here? Well, when he gets split up from Bran and Rickon and the like, because they head down into hide in the Winterfell crypts when Theon's in charge of Winterfell. And Luwin is there basically having to be trying to advise Theon. Hiding to nothing on that one. That wasn't not going to work. But there is one moment right at the very end, and so the assumption is that he hasn't changed in his views about magic. There's nothing there at all. But there's this one moment right at the very end when Bran and Rickon and co, they come out. Winterfell has been burned. They emerge from the crypts. They decide they're going to head off. But they just have a little scout around Winterfell before they go. And they go to the Godswood and they find Maester Luwin. And Maester Luwin dies there. Osha, basically, because he was going to die anyway, and Osha gives him a quick death. But what's interesting is they find him face down by the weirwood tree. And there's a trail of blood that has gone through the trees to the weirwood tree, which means that he decided wherever he'd first been sort of stabbed, attacked, he decided he wanted to get to the weirwood tree. He was a maester. He knew he was dying. He decided the place he wanted to die was the weirwood tree, and he crawled there. His final energy was crawling to the weirwood tree. And then he basically asked to be killed in front of the weirwood tree. Now, this is one of a number of what are quite possibly unintentional sacrifices to the weirwood tree. But what is interesting is that he chose that as the spot of his death. Why? Is it because he had a sudden love of weirwood trees? It feels unlikely. It feels unlikely that this was not his home. He didn't come from Winterfell. He was in River Run with Cat, and then he moved. He was obviously in the Citadel before that. He didn't seem to have any particular affinity there, but he decided that's where he wanted to die. Does this mean that at the last he had this kind of like thought, revelation? The weirwood trees, that's where I wanted, because maybe somehow I can pass up into the weirwood network. I don't know. It's just a fascinating little moment. He chose that as his place of death, and we're not told exactly why. Donna Daly, was Aemon sent to the wall because of the conspiracy? He's smart enough to work it out if he's at the Citadel. Also possible that he can use magic. So Maester Marwyn, Archmaester Marwyn the Mage, he says a lot when he's talking to Sam. He's fully subscribed up to this Maester conspiracy, and he basically says, why do you think they sent him up to the wall? He could have been Archmaester. He's very clever. He's very knowledgeable. Why on earth they wanted him out of the way? They didn't want him here because he was a Targaryen. Yes, there's the Dragon Dreams thing. That's why he got sent there. If you read through the what Maester Aemon himself says and the World of Ice and Fire, you get a slightly different view, which was that this was his decision to go. He had been offered the throne and had turned it down. And he knew that if he was still hanging around somewhere in the Seven Kingdoms, people, if they started to turn on Egg, they would say, well, who else could take over? Well, Aemon. He should have been king. He would have been a better king. And they might try and rally behind him. So in order to support Egg, he went to the wall because he was out of sight, out of mind. He was a member of the Night's Watch now, and they knew that he disavowed everything. So disavowed all his claims, that is. So there's a couple of different interpretations. My instinct on this one is that, yeah, Aemon probably did that, but he chose to go there, but the Citadel were happy with it. They were all right with it. Having Aemon there, they couldn't really refuse him, and clearly he was talented, but what were they going to do with a dragon-dreaming Targaryen? Did he discover about the Maester conspiracy? I mean, my take, which I hope is starting to emerge through this live stream, is that there isn't a conspiracy that's lasted a millennia here for the Maesters, that they a certain group of people sign up to it or anything like that. It's not that formal. This is just the agenda that they've got. The agenda is we want to get rid of magic and dragons and all of that stuff, and we want human wisdom and scientific method, etc., etc. And every now and then something happens that the Archmaesters and their council, they decide we're going to do something about this because there's a group thing going on, and has been a group thing going on there for a very long time. So that's my feels. It's not a conspiracy per se. It's an agenda which has been driving their actions. Greek Weirwood saying, I think Maester Luwin believes in magic, but his job is to teach the North not to believe. He dragged his bleeding body to the Weirwood tree to die. Yeah, oh yeah, probably you said that just before I was talking about that. And you sort of, Andrew K saying it seems like a brain-heart conflict for him. His brain and teachings tell him to deny it, but his heart knows it's real. Yeah, I find that a fascinating moment because it's not expanded on, because we don't get a chance to ask him about it, because none of them seem to query it. That's undeniably where he wanted to die, and you have to wonder whether it's because in his dying moments he yearned to believe. I want to believe, even if it's not, he actually does believe. Right, let's go to, have I got another question? I think that's me caught up. Chitara saying, got the impression last week you were a bit tired and grumpy. Hope all good. I'm yeah, absolutely fine. There's nothing there. Poor Dan's had a bad week, unfortunately, but he's okay. He just got a scrape, had to have some stitches, but no, other than that, I am very well, thank you. Sarah Arpegos saying, hi Robert, hope you're doing well, thank you. Maybe a bit of a weird question, but Essos, or at least part of Essos, seems to be scientifically more advanced than Westeros, yet we never hear of a learning hub. Do you think there are universities in Essos we don't hear about, or how do you think they retain their knowledge? Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I think what I would say is that Essos is very varied, incredibly varied in lots of different ways. In terms of sort of scientific advancement, what we have is some parts that are not at all. So like the Dothraki, for example, they keep to the old ways. They've got their traditions. They don't seem to have sort of wanted to develop the kind of the scientific knowledge at all. They're happy as they are. Other parts, like Slavers Bay, Marine, and the like, yes, they've clearly in the past there have been some pretty impressive feats building those pyramids. The pyramids are huge in Marine, but again, everything seems very in its place. The masters like being there, and they don't want to be encouraging a middle class and intelligentsia or anything like that, that would disrupt the system that they've set up. Similarly, we get a few places like Volantis, some of the other free cities that they were part of the Valyrian freehold, and so they're holding on to those bits of Valyrian technology that are still there. The Valyrians may have gone, but they're still in Volantis. We have got the black walls, which is this fused black stone. They're basically hiding behind there, that using that as a massive fortification. In Qohor, they still know the secrets of how to reforge Valyrian steel. So there are pockets of bits of knowledge left over from the Valyrian freehold. The only real shining example of clear sort of advances in sort of scientific technology. We get a few odds and ends. Like Mir, for example, you get the Mirish eyeglasses and lace working and things like that. That kind of show that there's some kind of advanced work going on. And in Braavos, however, we get the specialization of labor, basically, and the start of a factory industrial system. In that they can create a warship in a day, apparently. And how do they do this? Well, because everybody's doing different bits, not like a group of people going through and crafting things. Some of the lessons of the early industrial revolution were this specialization of labor. These people get really good at making nails. These people get really good at putting together the hull with the massive timbers. These people are really good at doing the rigging. These people are really good. And then you get everybody doing the thing that they're really good at or specialized in. So how does that happen there and not elsewhere? I think George R. R. Martin does pay attention to this, and he does think about this quite a lot. I think it's because Braavos is the closest we have to a sort of a egalitarian free city, in that they're avidly against slavery. So everybody there is a free person. Everybody there can do what they want. They can specialize in whatever they want to do. They can go join the theater. They can try and be a merchant. They can do what there's no limit on what your ambition should do within certain obvious parameters. And that has allowed this kind of more enterprising spirit to develop within Braavos than it has in other cities. And I really quite like that. It shows that George R. R. Martin has thought through what are the implications of the way that this city works or the way that that city works. It wouldn't make sense for the Dothraki to have all of these really high-tech things going on, because they're a people of traditions and they're a people who stick to the way that things have always been done. Auntie Slayer, what do we think about the institution of maesterdom, or what do we think the institution of maesterdom looks like by the end? Does Sam change it from the inside? Do they cease to exist, or something else? Also, don't forget I've made a Discord if you want it. Thank you. Yes. Email me. That's the way I will remember. Did I say that last time? I can't remember. Email me in deepgeek@gmail.com. Thank you. What will it look like at the end? Well, a lot of this will depend on what happens to Old Town. Now, at the moment, Old Town has stayed largely free from war. Sam arrives, it seems to be just carrying on as it is, listening to rumors of things going on in different parts of the world. But there is a big threat hanging off the coast of the Reach, which is Euron. And Euron's about to get involved in a big sea battle with the Red Wine Fleet and the Hightower Fleet. And if he wins that, he is clear to start considering attacking Old Town if he wishes to. That would be a huge statement. Apparently, there a few Ironborn spies have been discovered in Old Town, which seems to imply that he's got his eye on it. Certainly, the Hightowers are taking this very seriously. Lord Hightower has dispatched his sons to be doing different things. One of them's building up the sea defences. Another one's gone off to try and find some sails over, I think, from Lys. And so they're doing various different things. They're expecting an attack. Now, there's lots of potential imagery that we've got going on in Old Town. Lots of people think the burning of the Citadel, the library, can George R. R. Martin resist the kind of the echo of the burning of the Library of Alexandria? Perhaps not. That's just got into the fandom consciousness now. I would say far in excess of the amount of potential foreshadowing we have, but it just kind of resounds with people. Added to which, what if the old tower, or what if the high tower itself falls down? That would leave a huge mark culturally across. Everybody would be like talking about this. Do you hear what happened in Old Town? So I suspect something big is going to happen there. Euron's story, he's just going to, I personally think, for the Winds of Winter, he's just going to get more powerful and more scary. He's going to be dealt with, as it were, towards the very end of this plot of the story, I think. So will Old Town survive? Will the Citadel survive? I think at the very least, it's going to get a bit damaged. I think that probably the institution will survive. And yes, I mean, on the TV show, they had Sam being made Grand Maester. That does feel a little bit kind of like, let's just give all of our main characters a real good job at the end of things. Everybody seemed to get a good job. But realistically, he won't have had time to finish his chain, so he won't be a full maester. That's the one of the things, incidentally, that is the victim of George abandoning the 5-year time gap. He was planning on having a 5-year time gap. If you've not come across this before, I'm not going to go into all of the detail, but basically the idea was you can see most of the main characters park at about this point in the plot, somewhere where they could potentially stay for 5 years. Sam down in Old Town, John as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Arya in Bravos, Dany can stay over in Marine. This would allow everybody to age up 5 years, the dragons to age up 5 years. He eventually abandoned that idea, and we will see some of the implications of that sort of resounding out through the plot. One of which I suspect is that Sam should not, even the best maesters in the world apparently can only get 3 links on their chain in a year. So how long before you have enough links in order to become a maester? You've got to be there for several years. Sam is not going to have several years. So Sam is not going to be a full maester by the time we assume, leaves Old Town. So when he comes back, it wouldn't be as a maester who could then be sort of promoted to be Grand Maester. So I think he might well just head back down and learn some more. The institution, I think it would survive, be reformed, particularly if it does play some role in helping humanity in the end. The knowledge there, I could certainly see people wanting to expand the knowledge, disseminate the knowledge a bit more, because the maesters have been sitting on it, a lot of knowledge, and if they had spread that knowledge a bit wider, then perhaps that might have helped things a whole lot more. Kieran McGee, if the Maesters guard their knowledge as they do, how did Oberyn Martell get to study and then leave? He never seems to have wanted to become a Maester. Well, quite a few people do. You get so to rewind, the structure does not seem to be that you turn up and say and sign your life away immediately, say that this is it, I will be a Maester, and if I do not get enough of the links in my chain, I'm going to stay here in the Citadel forever. That doesn't seem to be the deal. They fully expect a significant number of people who sign up to this not to attain full Maester status. They fully expect that. In fact, we see when Sam arrives there, we see there's a whole load of scribes just in the sort of the outer courtyard, and we're told these are people who have they've been to the Citadel, they've survived, and now they're sort of hiring themselves out. And there's lots of people who learn about something and then go away. So the Maesters do disseminate the knowledge in a certain area. So when we're talking about them keeping their knowledge close, what we're not talking about is the information you would get on Economics 101 or Metalworking 101 or whatever the different links are. You study under the Archmaester and learn on that subject. If you can, at the end of or at whatever period, you can impress them that Archmaester enough that you are now an expert in that, they will give you a link. So you are being taught the course basically, and you can do your own research, but the secret stuff is not being taught. The secret stuff is in their top secret library. This is why we have this kind of subplot, or we think why we have this kind of subplot with the Faceless Men and the key, because the Archmaesters have keys that allow them to get access to anywhere in the Citadel, including to the library with all of the secret knowledge. The normal people do not, when they're doing their research, when they're studying. And so you can come along like Oberyn, he earned 6 links or whatever it was, learn the stuff you want and then go away. And they are okay with that because you've not learned any of the secret knowledge. You've just learned the knowledge that the Maesters would then go out and teach the Lord's children. Okay, let's go to relaxed like a cat. Do you think the Maester conspiracy will go beyond being simply a conspiracy in the upcoming books? Also, do you think you'll ever do a video on Elden Ring? Well, on Elden Ring, it's not on my radar at the moment. For those who don't know, this was a video game from 3 years ago, I'm going to say. George R. R. Martin was involved in writing a lot of the lore for it. It's in the kind of the Dark Souls ethos as a game, and I've not played it. I have seen it played, which makes me sound a little bit weird, but you know when you happen to be somewhere and somebody's playing the game. So I've seen it played, and I suspect I probably would enjoy it if I did play it, but I'm not an expert in that lore, so I'm not planning on doing any videos on that in the near future. It was a very well received game, by the way. It was Game of the Year as well that year. So, but on the main thing, will it go beyond being simply a conspiracy in the upcoming books? Yeah, so I think I've sort of covered this one in the earlier answers. Actually, if the Maesters accept the fact that dragons are back, that the others are back, that there's magic happening everywhere, I think they will want to do something. At the moment, Old Town is kind of insulated from this. It's quite interesting when we get the chapter, the Pate chapter, prologue. We hear the gossip going on in Old Town. And yes, they're getting this from the sailors who are coming into the port, but it's a long way from Meereen all the way over to Old Town. And they're debating, is this true? Are there really dragons? So the Maesters will only really have just about heard of it now, and they'll be deciding what to do. Commander Ray saying, "Hello, Robert. While I certainly think the Citadel and the Maesters want to push towards certain things, such as no more magic and better informed lords and kings, I don't think any of it is a conspiracy. I think the Maesters, being an institution, have built themselves into a bloc that passively works towards larger goals, because I find this weird. Why is a centre of education and knowledge, place of science, so stagnant? They hate being challenged on their knowledge, which goes against the principles of science. They're afraid of progress and of returning to magic. I think that's because the education given to Maesters, which instead of making them true scholars and thinkers, it's just obedient men to a higher mandate that persists because no one challenges it." Well, certainly the first half, I think you've encapsulated my view. I think conspiracy is definitely the wrong word. There is an agenda, there is a corporate culture, we might sort of say these days, that people buy into as they become a part of the Citadel. As for the sort of the second half about them not wanting to be challenged on their knowledge, going against the principles of science, afraid of progress, I mean, I think there's a clear and fair challenge there. The lack of progress in Westeros, technological progress, is noticeable. So for all of their dissemination of information through the Maesters, they're not disseminating they're not training up critical thinkers across the world. They're saying, if you want to be a critical thinker, you have to come to the Citadel and you have to think in the ways that we think. So they are always looking for knowledge, but it always gives the impression that they're looking for knowledge for its own sake, as opposed to what are the applications of this. So in many ways, this is a lot more of an academic kind of process rather than something that people might then go, oh, hang on a moment, I've learned how to do this and that, therefore I will design a lens which will help people. So that's the kind of thing that you say it's a cultural issue rather than a conspiracy. Northern Tommy saying, agree, conspiracy really adds the wrong connotation. It's bigger than that and exists on a fundamental level rather than on the level of the occult. They are openly anti-magic. Yeah, I think so. And Carl Carlsnark saying, educational orthodoxy is very real, even in our own world, where academic stagnation has been an issue for decades. Yeah, I mean, I think if you've ever been around academia, then you can certainly understand this kind of feel, is that you get just struggling to say this without sort of trying to lean in into any particular discipline, but when you get academic careers where your reputation is built upon your particular view of something, then somebody else's is another view which is based partly on your view, and then someone else is doing that which is based partly on that, and you create this interconnected whole of views which all rely on each other. Now, those views may be absolutely right, but it means that somebody coming out thinking in a different direction, they are viewed as sort of a dangerous heretic in many ways. You're going against what we know is the truth. Now, 99 times out of 100, that's probably right. They are going against what is known to be the truth, and they're just talking nonsense. But one time in 100, they're right, and they've discovered something that nobody else has, a different way of looking at things. But the construct that's there, all those people involved in that do not want that, because their reputations are built on the fact that that outlier is wrong. So yes, this what's the word you used? Educational orthodoxy. Carl Karsnak, I absolutely agree. Actually, not linking across from educational orthodoxy, but because it's Carl Karsnak. Now is the time. Moderators, I'd love to say thank you to you. You do an amazing job here in the chat. If you are watching this live, the reason why it's such a wonderful and uplifting place to be is because of the moderators who do an amazing job, just sort of encouraging people, welcoming people, seeing away any bots, that kind of thing. So if you are there in the chat, could you just show the moderators a little bit of love, because they absolutely deserve it. Thank you. Let's go to a question from Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying, "Hello, Robert. Hope all is well in your land." It is. Thank you. Could you please, this is it, other than Dan, but he is mending, do not worry. Could you please speak about the accomplishments of Grand Maester Benifer, how it was he survived Maegor's reign, and how he came to treat the ill-fated Aerea? Thank you. Okay, so Grand Maester Benifer. He was Grand Maester for Maegor the Cruel and Jaehaerys the First. And he was the fourth Grand Maester for Maegor. He killed the first three. So Benifer, to survive Maegor, was an achievement in and of itself. People did not wish to be Grand Maester because Maegor was not the most easygoing of kings. Let's put it that way. How he survived, though, was that Maegor's reign, many people, I think, want to characterize this as strong rule. It was not a strong rule. He was a strong man, but it started crumbling quite quickly. And in the last few months and year or two, then huge swathes of the Seven Kingdoms were up in arms against him. He never really ruled a united land. Now, the opposition started to coalesce around Jaehaerys, and the opposition which was sort of being based at Storm's End. And Maegor could see that he'd already got rid of Aegon the Uncrowned, and he could see that he got another challenger, and he did the kingly equivalent of calling the banners. He went to his Grand Maester and said, "Right, send messages by ravens out to everywhere in your hand, saying all loyal lords now have to rally to me." And Benifer realized this isn't going to go well, because there aren't going to be many people who rally to him now. And he stopped. He ran away. He thought, "I'm not doing this. I'm not going to have my name on this." He got on a boat and he went to Pentos. He just peaced out. So that's how he survived Maegor the Cruel. What's interesting is him then coming back, because he was a bit concerned, understandably, because he'd been Grand Maester under Maegor. Jaehaerys comes in wanting a new start. He doesn't want anybody who's there who is a Maegor loyalist in any way. We get a couple of different accounts. One, he returns, and another one, Jaehaerys sends for him and basically says, "Come back and be Grand Maester." Why? Well, I think my instinct is that this is just a matter of he kind of shown he wasn't a Maegor loyalist by running away. And then Jaehaerys was still leading quite a divided realm when he came in. There was still faith uprisings going on. What he needed to do was make sure that he didn't make any new enemies. And if this was the person who'd been sent by the Citadel to be the Grand Maester, and if he just sort of said, no, not that one, and got rid of them, he would immediately be putting their emphasis back down on Old Town, who weren't necessarily completely on side. So he'll take this guy. He'll not ruffle any more feathers, and Benifer seemed to do a reasonable job. After that, there are two things really that it sort of highlights. The first is the fact that he is the person who keeps the best records during that period. We're continually getting within Fire and Blood this kind of like, and Benifer tells us that such and such, and he seems a reasonably accurate. He's not as biased as some of the people there. He seems to be giving a reasonably fair account of things. And in particular, there is a period of time when Jaehaerys is over on Dragonstone with Alicent, because he sort of basically comes to the throne when he's not yet of age, and so it gets ruled. There's a regency, and so during that time, the regent kind of gets a little bit too big for his boots, and Benifer does record this, and this is how we know what happens in the small council meetings when they're debating what to do about Jaehaerys, because Jaehaerys is also in this time secretly married Alicent. When the powers that be were going, well, what would be the most politically advantageous marriage for Jaehaerys at this point? And they're trying to work this one out, and then he secretly marries Alicent. That marriage obviously works out all right, but Benifer during this period also, he kind of intercepts and doesn't send on messages which would have gone down to Old Town to the Septons saying, you'll never guess what's happened, because the Septons would be up in arms about this. The faith, this is another incestuous marriage by the Targaryens, and the faith were very angry about this already. And the idea that this new king was just the same as the old ones would have taken hold very quickly. Benifer kind of nipped that in the bud. Obviously, the news eventually came out, but he stopped it getting out before they could do some message management. So that's his first bit. The second thing which you asked about is Princess Aerea. Now, you'll know the story, I'm sure. Aerea Targaryen princess, she's stuck on Dragonstone. She's bored. She wants to be in King's Landing. She wants to travel. She claims Balerion the Black Dread. Flies on Balerion. Balerion flies off. This is very old Balerion by this point. Flies off and is gone for a long time, and then comes back eventually. We think from Valyria, big gash down Balerion's side. Aerea Targaryen falls off Balerion's back. Lucamore, Sir Lucamore of the Kingsguard, carries her body, which is burning up. It's hot. There's things. It's horrible. George R. R. Martin. This is basically like a horror bit of the story. There are things crawling under her skin. It's really quite gruesome, and we often in our minds we think, oh, this is a Septon Bath moment, because Septon Bath tells us what happens there, but it isn't. This is a Benifer moment. She gets taken to Benifer. He is the person who has to figure out how can we save her? What do we do here? And eventually he's the person who gets the ice bath and plunges her in the ice bath, which seems to kill these horrible creatures which are in her. So he's the person who saves the day. So, Aerea tragically dies, but she probably was going to anyway. But so he's the person who saves the day. But we're told that he does not record any of that. And this is noticeable because we're told he writes lots. He writes back to the Citadel all the time. This is odd that he doesn't write anything about it. And so we have to go over to Septon Bath's record. Septon Bath explains everything that happened, but it's Benifer who's the person who comes up with those ideas and deals with it. Reflective rambling saying, of course I walk in when they're talking creepy crawlies. Apologies. Yes, that's we were talking about Aerea Targaryen. Okay, so let's go to Magma Frost. Hi, Robert. I'm so glad to finally have an excuse to get this comment into a live stream. You often speculate that Maesters must be able to rework Valyrian steel in order to forge new chain links. Isn't it? I told you I had a challenge to this. This is one of the first questions I had. I love getting challenged on my logic and stuff, so please do keep it coming. Isn't it just as possible, if not even more likely, that they simply stockpiled pre-forged Valyrian steel links before the Doom? They probably don't need more than 100 or 200 of them, given how few Maesters go for them, and I'd like to think that they make an effort to recover and reuse Valyrian steel links from deceased Maesters. Though, as previously discussed, we don't know one way or the other. Is there any confirmation that they have to be forged fresh every time as a Maester earns one? Okay, well, so thank you for this. This is interesting stuff. So, first of all, in case you missed it, was sort of a sidebar on a previous live stream. Someone made the point, it may well have been you, Magma Frost, made the point that Maesters are going around in their chain with a huge amount of value. The Valyrian steel link alone would have been massively valuable, but also there would be a gold link and a silver link. So what happens to that? We're not told anywhere what happens to that after they die. But yes, it kind of makes sense that the Citadel might go to some efforts to reclaim them and reuse them. I suspect it wouldn't be 100% successful because you know how things go. And Maester Luwin, for example, I suspect somebody came and liberated that from his dead body. But you're also right. Maester Luwin says just 1 in 100 Maesters gets that link, which obviously leads to the question. I mean, how many Maesters are they? We don't actually know. There are, I think, 300 or so Maesters in castles and with lords and things like that. Judging from the amount of white ravens that were sent out to announce the change of seasons, that might not be an accurate judge. Maybe the idea is that those are just the central hubs, and then they send other ravens off to other places. Who knows? But 300 seems to be that number. There are an unknown number of Maesters in the Citadel, and an unknown number of Maesters out doing research projects and the like. But hundreds, you would probably think. But if only 1 in 100 has a Valyrian steel link, we're not talking potentially, if they do get to reuse them, we're not talking potentially massive amounts. They might have 20. So, is it possible that they bought a load of these from the Valyrian freehold before the Doom? Yeah, it's possible. Obviously, it's possible. Do we have any evidence for that? No. Do we have any evidence that they didn't do that? No. What about forging the Valyrian steel links? Well, is there any confirmation that they have to be forged fresh every time? The only thing we have on this is this is, I think, an email or maybe even a letter that went to George R. R. Martin very early on, when somebody asked him, when you talk about maesters forging their chain, are they literally forging the links in their chain? To which the answer was, that's just sort of like colloquial language. They are forging it by means of getting a new link whenever they learn or gain expertise in a new subject. And that does not imply that they are learning blacksmithing. To which the following question was, I ask, of course, because, and I don't know who asked this, so, but hat tip to whoever this anonymous person is. I ask, of course, because of the link of Valyrian steel and Maester Luwin's chain. Did he know the spells, or did he take an existing strip and beat it into shape? The spells here being the spells to forge, create Valyrian steel. And George R. R. Martin's reply to this was, he studied magical tomes and histories and mastered enough of the arcane lore to impress an archmaester into granting him a link. He did not necessarily have to make the steel himself. So, I mean, my take, that's all we have. So feel free to interpret that whichever way you want. But he's saying that in order to achieve your Valyrian steel link, you do not need to know how to forge or reforge Valyrian steel. That's not part of the curriculum that you need to learn. Now, my take, when I'm sort of saying, okay, you need to know how to, maesters must know how to reforge, reshape Valyrian steel. When I say that, it's because even if you had a link, you salvaged a link off of somebody, off of a dead maester, or you've got provided with a link by you bought it years ago from the Valyrians. You still need to, the link needs to have a hole in it that you need to shut in some way. Otherwise, the bits could come off. So that seems to imply that you do need to sort of melt it down and reforge it each time. Now, this is the point where we can go down a real rabbit hole. Might they have some sort of clever thing which for Valyrian steel, which is that's just a show link, and then they've got some other things to either side which clamp onto it? Maybe, I don't know. But this is where I come to Occam's razor. Occam's razor suggests to me that the maesters have access to some Valyrian steel in whatever shape. Maybe they've got some links. Maybe they reclaim links from dead maesters' chains. All of those things might be possible. But then, in order to attach it to a new chain, they have to kind of open up a gap, attach it, close up the gap again. That requires at least a little bit of ability. For what it's worth, I don't think that this is a massive issue, because the ability of the maesters to learn this, the information is out there. Yes, it's a closely guarded secret, but we know of at least one maester who went to Qohor and spent enough time there to be learning some of the secrets of what the Qohoric people thought you used in order to create Valyrian steel in the first place. So the maesters have at the very least gone out and learned as much as they possibly could. They learned as much as they possibly could from Valyria. I don't think that this is that unexpected a thing to say that they might know how to reforge Valyrian steel. So, I mean, this is I like challenges. So Dr. Debunk saying the links on either side of the Valyrian steel can be attached without altering the Valyrian steel link. Yeah, exactly. There are many ways around this. If you want to go down into all the different ways of doing this, my take is that this is just the simplest answer, that they know how to do it, and I don't think that changes huge amounts of law in any way, shape, or form. Michelle Raymond is saying, imagine the Maesters are actually performing blood magic and creating the links. I would keel over, I think. Yeah, I don't think they are doing that. So this is where I think that the key distinction comes in. They're not making Valyrian steel. They have got access to Valyrian steel, and I think that they can bend it and shape it into links. If it turns out that actually it was they've just got a full link and then they reattach the other things on either side of it, fine. It wouldn't alter my opinion too much about what has happened. Okay. Let's go to Ranabim Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. GGMU for tonight, regardless of the result. Well, cheers to that. In the section on Old Town in the World of Ice and Fire, we see that the original Maesters were properly into understanding pyromancy and magical crafts. I read this right at the very beginning, actually, of the live stream, if you did want to flick back to that. They were even said to be interacting with the Children of the Forest. Could you speculate exactly why the Citadel then deprioritized focusing on this section of research completely, such that Marwyn is convinced of a Maester conspiracy to eradicate magic altogether? Was it the coming of the Andals that forced the Citadel to not focus on magic? If so, Panamore the Twisted would be very unhappy. Yeah, so this is over the course of thousands of years, I think, is the basic answer to this. So how the Citadel was originally established, what it was looking at the time, how they operated, that will have changed huge amounts over thousands of years. So what we do not know is the point at which that shift happened. Maybe it was a long and gradual shift. Maybe maybe it was a reaction to the dragons first time around landing in Westeros. Maybe it was that recent. Maybe they had some very strong-minded people who were of that view, who were all in power and in the Citadel at the same time, and they just shifted the focus. We simply do not know. Your thought that maybe it's the Andals getting involved, because the Andals were and their faith is not particularly magical. I think there's probably a degree of that in there. Certainly, it would. The role of the faith is they sit cheek by jowl there in Old Town, and there's a huge amount of crossover. They've got the same patrons, the High Towers, so certainly I think it would be a very different feel of an organization if it were the faith of R'hllor there, for example, rather than the faith of the Seven. The faith of the Seven does not play up the kind of the magical, mystical side of things, so that kind of works quite well. My general feel, this was just an evolution over time. There may well have been a number of different times and moments. I suspect that there's also a sort of a soft power thing going on. The Pyromancers Guild used to be very powerful, and they had to make sure that they were slightly distinct from them in some way. I also think this kind of I've made the point earlier, George R. R. Martin wants his magic to be scary and unknowable, uncontrollable. And if it is those things, then it is a rational human response to go, I do not want to be near magic. I think sometimes we go, well, why on earth have they got that approach? And I think an equally valid question is, why on earth wouldn't they have that approach? If they see magic as being scary, uncontrollable, and can do great harm, it's a rational response um, to try and oppose it. Right. Ninja Robo saying, hi, Robert. Hope you're well. Thank you. My question really boils down to why. Why are the Maesters trying to eradicate dragons and magic? I can't see much tangible gain in it for them. Are they true believers that the world will be better without it? And if so, is it the case that acolytes turn up at the Citadel with that worldview, or are they indoctrinated when they arrive? Is it an open secret, or do you have to get so high up before you're let into the club? What do you think? So I think I've answered this probably in different ways and answering different questions. But I think just to underline what I think is the key point here, I don't think this is like uh, a conspiracy, a clear doctrine that you have to sign up to. Um, it's just this is how the atmosphere is. There are some key moments, like the having to spend the night there with the glass candles, where it's like, this is to prove to you that magic doesn't work. Although I have to say, the glass candles are working again does seem to imply maybe they have they keep this ceremony going for new maesters, and it does work. And the person suddenly go, "Wow, I can do magic." How would they react at that point? Um, you, I mean, I've already said I don't think Sam's going to get his maesters chained because I don't think he's got enough time. But how amazing would it be if Sam went through that process? He got put into the room with the glass candles, got told, you have to try and light these glass candles. And everybody's there thinking, ha 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 ha, he's not going to be able to do it. And then he does. How amazing would that chapter be? Don't think that's going to happen, but that would be quite amazing. But yeah, so I think it's simply a matter of this. This is the feel of the place as a whole. And you're not having to sort of sign up. Certainly, people arriving don't seem to be having to subscribe to some views before they get there. Uh, Marwyn, the mage, Archmaester Marwyn, does seem to um, suggest that if you come in with these kind of magical views, then you probably won't do well, and you might even uh, sort of get sidelined in one way or another. Uh, Maybe he's right, maybe he's not, but it's definitely noticeable that he rose to the great heights of Archmaester and he seemed to survive. So it's not that you cannot do that. Um, Certainly, you get someone like Qyburn who got chucked out of the Citadel, but then he was doing very questionable magical research. Um, so yeah, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's not a thing that you I've got this far and I've suddenly realised now, or you get to a certain level and then suddenly people say, right, now we tell you what this organisation is really about. That's not the kind of feel. Joshua Hart, I hope I pronounced that right, saying first time joining live. Well, welcome. Great to see you. And thank you very much for the super chat. Love all your content, especially Lord of the Rings. Grand Maester Pycelle set off the conflagration at Summerhall. He is the evilest dastard in the Seven Kingdoms. Pycelle set off the. I don't. I mean, it's a nice theory. I think it was set off by Egg deliberately, and it just got out of control. That's my personal take. The we looked at some hall a few weeks ago, so we won't go into a huge digression into there, but it's noticeable that the we do get an account from a maester who was there, although it's that one that has the ink blots over it, so we don't hear everything about it. But yes, there was a maester there, but I don't think it would have been the maester who set off the actual fire. Let's go to question from Madeline Tyrell Dane saying, "Hi Robert, hi there. What is the relationship between the Hightowers and the Maesters? Do the Hightowers have a role in the Great Maester Conspiracy? Do the Hightowers have a more significant role in the story than has been revealed so far?" Well, on the last part, I think the answer has to be yes, and I think we will start to see that in the Winds of Winter. I think it's not coincidental that their sword is called Vigilance. They keep a watch out from the top of the high tower for things, and they are ready. What are they waiting for? Is it something to do with the long night? Quite possibly. Do they therefore have a role in the story? Well, in history, the thing, other than a couple of small aberrations like the Dance of the Dragons, the Hightowers have noticeably kept themselves to their city. They haven't looked to start their own kingdom, really, beyond their own little boundary. They seemed happy. They were in charge of, before King's Landing happened, for most of the history of Westeros, Old Town was the city, the biggest city, the metropolis, the center of everything going on, the great trading hub, the great learning hub, the great spiritual hub. This was the place to be. And the Hightowers were happy to stay there. They were happy to have overlords in the Gardeners. They didn't ever really seem to challenge that. They didn't ever really seem to when the Tyrells got put in place, they didn't really seem to particularly push against that either. They didn't seem to push for more power than they already had. They have the soft power across the Seven Kingdoms because they are the people who sponsor both of the two big soft powers, being the Faith of the Seven and the Maesters. Do they have a role? Given the fact that we're moving away from calling this a conspiracy and more this is the culture of the organization, do they have a role? Well, yes, because as a sponsor, as the big sponsor of the Citadel, obviously they have a bit of a say in this. Given the fact that the Hightowers that we know are rumored to dabble in magic, I suspect that they're not as signed up to this as many of the Maesters are, but they're okay with this idea of controlling the magic around the Seven Kingdoms. They're just staying in their place, but they're okay with the idea of like trying to control magic and dragons and zombies and all the rest of it. So yeah, we will see what their role is in the Winds of Winter, and that is one of the things I'm actually most intrigued by, because they have been so silent all through this story. They are the oldest house, they are one of the richest houses, they're one of the most powerful houses, and yet they've done so little. George R. Martin is keeping them up his sleeve. Zachary Kronich mispronounced that, I'm sure. I apologize. Hey Robert, I've always wondered if we have any evidence of any maester relaying faulty messages from ravens to a lord, especially any illiterate lords. Are there any examples of this in the Song of Ice and Fire and Blood? We get plenty of examples of maesters not passing on messages. So Benifer was a good example we had earlier when we had Maegor saying, send out these messages. We also get in and he didn't. We also get a great example of in the Dance of the Dragons when we get towards the end, the orders basically go to with Daemon, who is with Nettles, to capture them both, basically, and the Maester there gets it and sort of gives them a heads up. We get a lot of that kind of stuff. What most of the time, though, I would say the vast majority of the time, the Maesters do seem to faithfully pass on what they're told to, because the whole system relies on trust in those Maesters. They're writing the messages, they're reading the messages. If a lord started thinking, I don't think this guy is passing on the messages I asked him to, or I don't think I'm getting the messages back, or when one lord meets another and say, did you get my message? And the other one goes, no, or yes, why did you write that? So I didn't want that written. That would just bring the whole system crashing down. So it is in the Maester's best interests the vast majority of the time to be passing on the exact right message. But there are, as I say, there are a few isolated examples of messages which haven't been transmitted, or they've been partially passed on, or delayed a little bit, that kind of thing. So there's some tweaking around the edges of the system rather than actually breaking it down completely. Caius Ballerina, what do you think happened to Maester Willis, who went to Hardhome, killed by Gorm's enemies, sent into slavery? Could he have seen the destruction of Hardhome? So Maester Willis disappeared in Hardhome, as we know, was destroyed in a way which is a massive mystery. I mean, I don't think enough of a mystery to warrant an entire live stream, but it's quite the mystery. What happened to him? So he basically he disappeared. I mean, the second option, is it that you give sent into slavery? I think seems the most likely to me. That certainly I think is what is hinted at. But I will have a little look and see whether I can. It's been a while since I've read the detail of that passage. If I'll go back to it, if I read something slightly different in it, I will let you know next time. Could he have seen the destruction of Hardhome? It's possible, but if he was there, then he would have died. Put it that way. Maura Lee, hi there, Maura. Great to see you. What will be the role of the Maesters with the war with Euron and with the others? Will it be significant or not? So I mean, I think these are two different things. With Euron, basically Euron is going to, we think, once he's dealt with this sea battle, Euron will probably try and attack Old Town. Now, what will the Maesters do? Well, try not to be attacked too much, is the short answer. Whether or not they have anything to add to this, the defense, we don't know. We've never really seen this before. Old Town has been attacked numerous times. It's been sacked, it's been burned, it's had plagues running through the city. Lots of things have happened to Old Town over the years, and we don't really read of the Maesters ever sort of like upping their game and going, oh, we've got a way to stop this from happening. We've got a way. A dragon lands on the top of the high tower. The Maesters don't go, well, we know a way to stop, to repel dragons. Here's our big anti-dragon repellent machine. They don't ever seem to do that. So I think in terms of an actual attack on Old Town, the answer will be not a lot. Hide, lock doors, that kind of thing. When it comes to the others, but the TV show was interesting because it portrayed them as just not really believing it, and that they kind of believe their own propaganda, or everything, all of the magic has gone, that's not real, and I guess that's possible. I guess that they could be in this position where they think, oh well, it's not real. There's some wishful thinking, and it gets too late before they can respond. I think that's entirely possible. I think it's quite likely we won't actually see them have their big meetings. Sam, who will be our eyes and ears, is not going to be invited to big meetings. He's going to be the person who is going to be studying and scurrying around, and maybe he'll get himself attached to a particular archmaester, but he's not going to be sitting in their big sort of strategy meetings. So we won't actually see that bit. I think it is most likely that the input of the maesters will be unintentional. Sam will take stuff, information, maybe more than information. I think that Jack and Hagar will get something. Maybe Euron. We know Euron. The way that he works is he doesn't just destroy places; he takes stuff as well. This is where he gets all of his plunder. He get that dragon binder he got, and when he was at the Kingsmoot, they got out these big chests and emptied them out so that everybody could come and grab some treasure. Basically, he bribed. It's part of the system, but he bribed people into voting for him. And this was the treasure that he'd gained from various raids over in Essos and further afield. So he will raid Old Town. If he attacks it, he will take stuff from there. So maybe he will get some things. Maybe he will read some books that he finds. Maybe he will discover some magic himself and get even crazier. Maura Lee also saying, just a show of love and support. Thank you very much. Hugely. Maura, you know how much I appreciate your support. So thank you so much for that. Okay, like Greek Weirwood saying, I forgot, does the horn say it's Dragonbinder? Do we know that, or is it just Euron? Can he read Valyrian? Who says so? Makoro says so, who can read Valyrian. Let's go to a question from Donna Daly saying, hi Robert, the Faith of the Seven and the Maesters both have strong links to the High Towers. Do you believe they're all working together to rid the world of magic? The Faith seems to be the only religion in the Ice and Fire world that appears to have no magic at all. Also, why aren't people more suspicious of the High Towers? They have heavy influence over two of the biggest soft power organizations in the world. Yeah, I mean, the second is it's a good question. Just on the first bit, are the Faith of the Seven and the Maesters working together? I don't think they're working together. But I think they often find that they have shared interests. So it's certainly noticeable that the Faith opposed the Targaryens strongly when the Targaryens first arrived after Aegon the Conqueror had gone. Then the Faith were hugely opposing Maegor, and then also Jaehaerys and Aenys. So for a long period of time, there was a huge amount of opposition to them. And did the Maesters also oppose them? Well, we think that they got rid of the dragons. So that's not opposing the Targaryens per se, but opposing the arrival of the dragons. Why aren't people more suspicious of the High Towers? I mean, they've just always been there. I think that's the thing. It's like I'm sure there are people who are suspicious of them. Archmaester Marwyn is. Barbary Dustin gives a long speech to Theon about how she doesn't trust them. She talks about how they read all of our messages and they give up their surnames, so we don't know where they come from, and they're not as celibate as you might think. And they put in the Maester in Winterfell, and he was whispering into Rickard Stark's ear, and pushing him into having his Southron ambitions, she just like rattles out all of this, sort of scree of thoughts against the Maesters, and she's not the most independent or not independent, objective, I would say, of witnesses here. But it does show that there are some people around who really are quite suspicious of the Maesters, if not necessarily of the Hightowers. The Hightowers are just a family, and the fact that the Hightowers do not tend to get as involved in national politics, as it were, I think is what makes people not be as suspicious, because they're not so overtly trying to grab power. They're not there like you get in King's Landing, in the Red Keep, jockeying for power amongst all of these different the Lannisters, the Baratheons, the Tyrells, the Arryns, who's got the most power and strength here. The Hightowers, broadly speaking, one or two exceptions, but broadly speaking, stay out of all of that. So people do not see them as trying to grab power. It's and mostly the Maesters are just they're training up the Maesters. So why be suspicious of them? April Tyndall saying it's weird how Barbary gets all the credit for the grey rats idea when it's Catelyn who first called the Maesters grey rats. Yeah, I mean the grey rats, actually, if you search for grey rats, there's 7 matches. I did. This was one of the last searches that I did just before I went live, and the first quote. This is a Catelyn chapter. Maester Luwin saying, "We have no steward," and then Cat thinks Maester Luwin reminded he was like a little grey rat. She thought he would not let go. That's the first thought about the grey rats. But yeah, Barbary Dustin, I'll just read a little bit here of what she says. "If I were queen, the first thing I would do would be to kill all those grey rats. They scurry everywhere, living on the leavings of the lords, chittering to one another, whispering in the ears of their masters. But who are the masters and who are the servants truly? Every great lord has his master, every lesser lord aspires to one. If you do not have a master, it is taken to mean that you are of little consequence. The grey rats read and write our letters, even for such lords as cannot read themselves. And who can say for a certainty they are not twisting the words for their own ends? What good are they, I ask you?" And she sort of carried on for quite a long time. She certainly is suspicious of them. Cat makes this connection as well. There is people, not necessarily the Hightowers, but of the Maesters, people that plenty of people are a little bit uncertain. Right. Let's go to. Those are the last of my patron questions about sort of Maester conspiracy and things like that. If you've got more questions, drop them into the chat. Now is a good time. I've got a couple of Lord of the Rings questions, which I will quickly answer, but then we will round off with going through the chat about any more questions on this subject. Martin S saying, "Hello, Robert. I was wondering about the dynamic of Manwe and Varda as king and queen of the Valar and Valinor. Is Varda sharing regnancy with Manwe, or is she his consort? Or maybe that doesn't apply to their relationship at all, the way it normally does to regular royalty. While I kind of like equal in regnancy, or that it is not applicable at all, that is viewed through a present-day lens and might not be what Tolkien intended. I think Manwe is said to be the greatest in authority among the Valar, which fits Varda in consort, at least at first glance. What do you think?" Okay, so really interesting question. If you're new to this, there's the Valar are the sort of the pantheon is probably the best way of putting it, of Tolkien's creation. There is the one god Uru over above all of this, but he's kind of delegated down to the Valar in Arda, Middle-earth. Now, of these Valar, there are 8 who are called the Aratar, who are like the top Valar, and they are held by the elves in equal reverence. However, and those include Manwe and Varda. However, Manwe is the High King, and his title is Eru's Vice Regent on Arda. So he is the one who is closest to Eru's heart. He is the person who is in charge. He is the ruler. Varda is his consort, his wife. But in and of her own right, she is of that top tier of Valar. So I hope that kind of makes sense, is that it's like Manwe is the first among equals, but he's definitely the High King. Ranabe Mitra, in yesterday's video on the history of Mordor, another beautiful script, by the way, thank you very much. I wanted to follow up with you and ask, when did Melkor raise Orodruin or Mordor? We have no direct clues for this in the text, but I've seen online speculation that this could have been after the Spring of Arda, when Tulkas was sleeping and Melkor came from the outer darkness and destroyed the two lamps and raised the Iron Mountains. Would love your input and speculation on the topic. Okay, so this, for those who missed it, I did a History of Mordor video, and I was trying to sort of establish what's the starting point here for Mordor, and it's actually quite hard because when you're reading the Silmarillion, the action is where the elves are most of the time, because it's written by the elves. This is the elves' legends and history, and most of the story to start with is in, I mean, the geography of the land changes a huge amount, but it's up in sort of Beleriand, a part of the land that gets sunken, submerged, and then the action moves across into sort of Middle-earth, the map that we know a bit later. And again, the elves aren't really based down near Mordor. So it's quite hard to get an exact idea about the start, but we do get this, and this is a footnote in volume 12 of the History of Middle-earth, and the footnote written by Christopher Tolkien, and he's talking about the word Mordor, and he says it may be already an elvish name for that region because of its volcanic Orodruin and its eruptions, which were not made by Sauron, but a relic of the devastating works of Melkor in the Long First Age. Now, so this is perhaps slightly contradicted by another sort of section elsewhere. If you're new to Tolkien scholarship, this does happen a lot. Tolkien did shift and change his mind a lot on a lot of different things. Going through what we get in the Lord of the Rings is like an end product, but we have a huge amount of scholarship on all of the scraps of paper and drafts and scribblings out and things that he did, trying to get a picture of the wider world and background and history. But here the suggestion is that if you're leaving aside this idea of where the name Mordor comes from, and Mordor literally just means black country, the suggestion is that Mordor and Orodruin itself were made by a relic of the devastating works of Melkor in the Long First Age. Now, the Long First Age is not the first age that we often think about. This is what's often called the Elder Days in Tolkien's world. So this starts when the elves awaken. The Valar have pretty much abandoned Middle-earth, to be fair. They've gone off, they've got their own continent, and they're happily living over there. Morgoth, the big antagonist, holds sway over Middle-earth. The elves awaken, the Valar eventually find them and then go to war. That's basically the story. Morgoth gets captured and put in prison. So the thinking has to be, if it is during that period, we're told that Morgoth strode around the land, and he sort of like was constructed fortresses and pits. So whereas I like this idea that this was when he knocks over the two lamps, much earlier in time, the two lamps which were giving light. And initially, lots of the world was scarred. As much as I like the idea that perhaps that might have led to the creation of Orodruin, this, if it is in the long first age, then this is in this period of time. So perhaps the formulation for it was there when the world was scarred by him knocking over those lamps, and then he then started founding these pits and fortresses, and Mordor was one of those things. So that's my general take on it. And then Sauron moved in much later, but it was already the kind of habitat that he would want to live in, because he's already got the volcano there, and the ash cloud and everything is there already. Rabbi Mitra also asked, why did Sauron choose Orodruin as a forge for making the One Ring? My headcanon says that since Melkor raised the volcano, its fires were magically imbued and fit for creating such an artifact. No other fire, including Eregion, could be fit for making the One Ring. Is my understanding correct here? Well, perhaps. I mean, I certainly like this idea that, maybe this was made by Morgoth and this is sort of the evil fire energies going on. I kind of like that. Gandalf does say in an offhand way, when people would think, talking at the Council of Elrond about destroying the ring, he sort of says, well, no dragons around now who have fire that's strong enough to melt this ring. Which seems to imply that he thinks some dragons of the past may have done, which seems to imply it isn't something specific about Orodruin that is the thing there. It's the heat that is the key point. But why did he choose it? Because that's the perfect book. Mordor is the perfect place for him to set up shop there. In the Second Age, that's when he moved in there. It's very defendable. The three big mountain ranges, you can picture the map in your head. I'm sure this very defendable land. It's already working for him in terms of the volcanic ash is making it darkness, which means that he can raise his army of orcs there nice and easily. And he's got a mountain here that he can use to be doing his forging in. So I think it was just that this all kind of works for me, rather than him hunting for a mountain that would work and then saying, oh, I'll set up base here. He set up base there and it had what he needed. Okay, let's go to the chat. And Curse Ballerina asking about Maesters. Do you think Barbary Dustin is right? Why would Maester Wallace want to encourage Southron ambitions? What did he or the Citadel gain by fomenting rebellion? Well, this is a really good question. It's one that has vexed me for a while. I'm increasingly of the view that Barbary Dustin is not a reliable witness. But that doesn't mean she's not right sometimes. Now, if we do go with the idea that she's right on this issue, that the Maesters did send a particular, so the Citadel sent a particular Maester there to whisper into the Stark's ears and sort of suggest, you know what, you really should be focusing a little bit more down on the south. Don't worry about the north so much. Why don't you set up a few alliances? What might they get from it? Well, I don't necessarily think this is true, but it's possible that if we buy into the idea of some kind of conspiracy or agenda, we've got rid of the dragons, yes, but can we get rid of the Targaryens? Finally, they're now in the same way that the Maesters couldn't get rid of the dragons when there were 20 massive flying dragons everywhere, but they could when they were down to just a handful and a whole load of dragon eggs. They couldn't get rid of the Targaryens when there were loads of them everywhere. By the time we get to Eris, actually, how many Targaryens had left? Well, him and Rhaella, and they had a son. And for a long time, that was it. Viserys wasn't born until quite a few years later, and Dany wasn't born until Robert's Rebellion. So if you wanted to get rid of the Targaryens, that would be the moment to do it before Rhaegar got lots of kids, and the Targaryens' family tree would potentially expand out again. So if you're going to follow this logic down, you say, well, how on earth are you going to get rid of the Targaryens? You have to create a coalition of people who might potentially be against them. And if the Maesters are playing politics here, you go, okay, so let's say that at the time, who was there being an ally for the Targaryens? Well, the Hand of the King was the Lannisters, and Rhaegar was about to marry the Martells, so southern places. Why don't we see whether we can get a grand coalition of the northern type places? And then it just requires people don't like Aerys. It just requires something to start a civil war which could potentially get rid of the Targaryens and all of their magical dragon dreams in one fell swoop. So if you were to go down that route, as I say, I'm not 100% on it, but if you were to go down that route, that would, I think, be the argument for why they might want to do it. Reflective rambling. Brian Valco, how do High Septons get the job? Well, so this has shifted. In the good old days, the High Septons, as far as we can tell, the High Septon was just appointed by the faith, and they would decide for themselves. I mean, we don't, at the risk of being topical, at the time of writing this, we don't think there's an equivalent of a papal conclave or anything like that. But they seem to choose it as some. But the High Towers take an active interest, and the High Towers can sort of put in one of their own when they need to. Most of the time, they seem to sort of let it go. But if they feel the greater good requires a particular one, like for example, when the Targaryens put pressure on them to make sure that the next High Septon wasn't rabidly against them, they put in place this really old guy who could barely speak a coherent sentence. So that's the way it worked. When the center of the polity moved more towards to King's Landing, and so the High Septon was based in King's Landing, it is still up to the prerogative of the faith to be choosing of their own. However, it's very clear, you see this time and again, the kings they intervene a lot. So you get Baelor the Blessed put in his person a couple of times. We certainly see that Tywin has a view on who the new High Septon should be, that kind of thing. So it's the crown has more of a role, but it has shifted a lot. The more political it's got, the more of a role the politicians get. Reflective rambling. Thank you very much, by the way. Picking up questions for other people. I love it when you do that. It highlights questions for me. The chat goes through so quickly, I can't pick up on everything, but this highlights things for me. Picking up a question for Chitara. Who is using the candles before Euron or Jaqen gets them? Do you mean glass candles here? We're talking the obsidian candles. So Marwyn the Mage has got one. And there seem to be at least 4 in the Citadel. And there are some more. Hwaith tells Dany that the glass candles are being used again in Asshai and I think in Karth. I think she says she is in Karth when she says it anyway. So it's magic users and people like the pardon me, like the maesters who have them for a political reason. Okay, I think that's nearly caught up. Let's have a quick flick through. Carl Carstnark saying Tolkien didn't like morally grey much, whereas George R. Martin revels in it. George R. Martin definitely revels in morally grey. Tolkien does in a subtler way, but I think it's as in his characters are definitely three-dimensional, but there is a very clear divide between good and evil in Tolkien in a way that there definitely isn't in George R. Martin. And quickly flicking through. Desert Stormborn, Charlie 1-1. The Citadel has tried a lot of opposition to the Targaryens, from tacit tolerance to opposition with the Faceless Men to subversion of rule. Yes, I think I would agree, but not much overt. Some subversion, but not much overt. Reflective Round being saying apparently the second question was April Tyndall's, not Chitara's. YouTube is being really strange. Well, in that case, well, thank you, and April, that was for you. Okay, right. So I think with that, let me start to draw this one to a close. So next week is what I said I was going to do. This one is the pre-recorded one. It's next week that I'm going to do a pre-recorded one for. We'll do a Lord of the Rings one. So patrons, I will come out to you in advance and say what questions, ask questions for that. And what else to say? Oh yeah, reminder in Deep Sleep. I will tomorrow get up the first video onto there, but if you want to do me a favor, you could go to In Deep Sleep. There will be a link if you're watching live somewhere in the chat. If you're watching this back a bit later, down in the description, there's a link, I'm sure, and that is these recordings, but designed to help people get to sleep, because people tell me they use my my live streams to get to sleep too. So that's what they will be about over on that, dedicated on that channel. That's what that will be. If you want to do me a favor, go over and subscribe. That would be absolutely fantastic. Okay, so I will be back next week at the same time. If you are watching this back a bit later, appearing somewhere around here, going to be a link to more of these live streams here on this channel appearing. I'll put somewhere in the middle here, just over my face. I'll put a link to In Deep Sleep, and somewhere, hang on, here will be a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Patrons, thank you. Moderators, thank you again. Give a little bit of love just as we go to the moderators. I would hugely appreciate that. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.